We're back. We took a long break. Sorry about that. We just had kind of a lot going on. We had a couple vacations, but we were definitely sure that we were going to get back into it. So, without further ado, we're going to get into Matthew chapter 14. Okay? All right, so here we go. So, Herod kills John the Baptist. Okay? When Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, heard about Jesus, he said to his advisors, "This must be John the Baptist, raised from the dead. That is why he can do such miracles." For Herod had arrested and imprisoned John as a favor to his wife Herodias, the former wife of Herod's brother Philip. John had been telling Herod, "It is against God's law for you to marry her." He was talking about for him to marry Herodias. It was against God's law to marry her. Herod wanted to kill John. The king wanted to kill John the Baptist. Remember John the Baptist? Who's John the Baptist?
John the Baptist is the person who baptized Jesus.
Good job. Excellent, excellent. And he was a person who came before Jesus, that was feeding people the word before Jesus came.
And what's the wife's name?
The wife of King. Hold on. No, that's something else. The wife's name of King Herod in this story is Herodias. Herodias. Okay. Okay. So, and John the Baptist is telling Herod, "Hey, it's against the law for you to marry her." So Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of a riot. You know what a riot is? A riot is when a lot of people get mad. A whole bunch of people, a big old crowd. So Herod was scared that if he killed John the Baptist, a riot was going to ensue. And because a lot of people love John the Baptist. Okay? Because all the people believed John was a prophet. Okay? So all the people believed that John the Baptist was a prophet. So that's why Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of killing John because he didn't know what the people would do if he did that, because John was loved by many people. Okay? But at a birthday party for Herod, Herodias' daughter, okay, her daughter performed a dance that greatly pleased him. It was really nice to him, okay? So he promised with a vow to give her anything she wanted. So he basically said, "Because you made such a nice dance and performed a nice dance, I'll give you anything that you want." But he didn't know that he said something that was going to be pretty powerful, okay? At her mother's urging, in other words, her mom suggested to her, gave her a suggestion, the girl said, "I want the head of John the Baptist on a tray." You heard that? It's pretty graphic, right? It's pretty bad. She said, "I want the head of John the Baptist on a tray." In other words, she wanted him dead. She wanted his head cut off.
And
It's pretty gross.
Don't think.
It's pretty gross.
My head is one.
Don't picture too long now. But hold on, I want to explain to you what it all means. Remember, so they hated John the Baptist because John the Baptist had told them that it was against the law for them to be married. So because of that, that's what the girl said, because she hated John the Baptist so much. Then the king regretted what he had said, but because he did make his promise in front of all of his guests, he issued the necessary orders. So John was beheaded in the prison. Make sense? All right, so it happened. Okay? Off with his head. That's what Herod said, and that's it. Okay? Okay? And his head was brought on a tray and given to the girl, who took it to her mother. Okay? Really powerful stuff, I know, guys, but it's what the Bible says. Okay? Later, John's disciples came for his body and buried it. Okay, they wanted to make sure they wanted to bury him to pay respects to his life and to his body and put him in the ground like you're supposed to be buried. Okay. Then they went and told Jesus what had happened. Okay. As soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. A remote area is like a quiet place, far away from everyone else. So think about it. As soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. Why do you think he went to a remote area to be alone?
Because maybe he's talking to God about what they did, and then, or maybe he went somewhere else to tell the people.
Well, so think about what I'm asking you. I'm saying I'm not saying what he did when he got there. I'm saying, why do you think he went to a remote area to be alone?
Maybe he was scared.
Scared?
Yeah. Or mad.
Mad? What do you think?
I think that he was sad.
Good job. I think he was a little mad, but he was also sad. So people who are sad, a lot of times they like to go away and be by themselves. They don't want to be seen, or they don't want to be bothered, because they just want to be peace and quiet. Okay? So, but what does that show us? That shows us that Jesus was, even though he was God, he was also human, and he experiences things. He feels things just like we do. He got sad just like we get sad. Okay? He got upset just like we got upset. Why? Because who was John the Baptist? John the Baptist is somebody he loved very much, who baptized him. Okay? Somebody who was very close to him. So that was his friend, and he was killed.
Just like Oscar, which was my doggy friend.
Well, you were sad. We were sad because the dog died, but yeah, it's a dog.
I was a little mad.
You were mad?
Because she died, and I don't like when people die.
Yeah, it's sad. So I think he was probably more upset also because of the fact that how he was killed. It was very brutal, very gross. Okay, and it takes a very hateful person to do that to somebody. So it was very evil also, right? So Jesus was mad and he was sad. He was mad because it was evil, and he was sad because his friend died. Okay, let's move on. Where were we? Okay, but the crowds heard where he was headed and followed on foot from many towns. So the crowds knew where he was going, and they followed him anyway. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Compassion means when you understand somebody's pain. I think that they also were sad. The people who were following him, the crowd that was following him, they knew John the Baptist too, and they were sad. So it says that Jesus had compassion on them. That means he felt very bad for them. He felt very sorry for the fact that they lost their friend. And he healed all the sick that were there. That evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place. It's a far away and quiet place, okay? And it's already getting late, so it's getting dark and it's getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." So send the people away, otherwise they're going to be here too late, and then they're going to be hungry and not have anything to eat, or have to travel late at night to get something to eat. But Jesus said, I want you to pay very close attention to this, because this has a double meaning. Okay? You know what a double meaning is?
Like, it kind of means that, like, a word can have two different meanings as...
Okay, well, this is more of a deeper spiritual meaning, but let's look into it. But Jesus said, that isn't necessary. You feed them. And they were confused when he said that. when he said you feed them, they're like, how are we gonna feed all of these people? We don't have that much food, if any food at all, right? But then this is what they said. But we have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. That's it. That's all they had. They had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So a loaf of bread is like that, what we have right there. You see those two? That's 2 loaves of bread. So they had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Okay? They didn't think that they had enough to feed all those people. But Jesus said, bring them here. He was talking about the 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, right? Bring them here, he said. Then he told the people to sit down on the grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up toward heaven, and blessed them. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he gave the bread to the disciples. Okay? The disciples distributed it to the people. So they gave it to all the people. They all ate as much as they wanted. And afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. Leftovers. Okay? Leftovers. About 5,000 men were fed that day, in addition to all the women and children. Okay? All the women and children. Plus, they all got food. 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's a miracle. And the reason that Jesus was able to do that is because he looked up towards the heaven and he blessed the food. So it says here that 5,000 men were fed that day, in addition to all the women and children. The reason for that is because in that period in time, men and women were separated. They usually ate separately when in public. So the children would eat with the women, and the men would eat separately. So the person who's telling the story only knew about the 5,000 men because he knew approximately how many men there were. Okay? But what do you get so far from this story?
What I get so far from the story is that, so Jesus was sad about how King Herod killed or chopped up the head of.
But fast forward, I'm talking about the feeding so far.
So everyone followed him, and the disciples needed to know how they're gonna feed everyone, and so then a miracle happened.
Okay, what was the miracle?
God.
What was the miracle?
Oh, the 5 loaves of bread. Wait, was it
2 fish.
And 2 fish turned into a bunch of fish and a bunch of loaves.
Did it turn into a bunch of fish, or was it still 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread? That's a good question.
Yeah, I think.
Hold that thought. What do you got?
I have 3 questions, but
Okay.
they're short. How many people were there, and how many breads they got a piece, and how many breads did each people get?
That's a great question. That's a very good question. So there were 5,000 men, and then there was a lot of women and children also. Okay, there was 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. That's what the story says. Okay, we always have to be consistent with what the story actually says. It doesn't say that there was 10 fish after he blessed the food,
No, I
or blessed them. Hold on. It didn't say that there was then 50 loaves of bread. It didn't say that the food increased at all, the actual food. He just said that they all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. So to answer your question, how much did they eat? As much as they wanted. So they were full.
So like one person ate 2 breads and they were full?
No, well, the bread that they ate made them very full. Even the little smallest pieces of bread made them very full. Now let me explain to you what that means. So other than them just simply eating food, there's another meaning behind it. The other meaning behind it is that Jesus, his followers only had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Okay? That wasn't enough to feed all the people. Not for humans. But Jesus is God. So when we have something, it's never enough. But when God has it, it's always enough. So God can make it enough with anything. So, hold on. So, God took the 2 loaves and the 5 fish, and he was able to feed everybody. Jesus took the loaves and 2 fish and was able to feed everybody. Because even though when we have something, it's not enough, what he touches is always more than enough. And then the other part is this, that there were leftovers. That means that he gave so much that there was even food left over for some other people to eat. And do you remember how many baskets were picked up?
2?
12 baskets of leftovers. Okay?
What?
Hold on. So, the leftovers, you can think of it like this. The leftovers are the food that we still eat today. The food that we still eat today is part of those leftovers. Now, what I mean by that is, Jesus gave them hope. He gave them a reason for believing. He gave them faith. So he wasn't just talking about feeding them actual food. He was talking about feeding their hearts. Feeding their hearts so that they can have faith, compassion, love, strength, and everything to push forward. So as long as you have God with you, he will always feed you in spirit. Not just food, in your heart, in your spirit. And whatever it is that you bring to God, he can multiply it. And he can make it much greater than anything you can do with it. So you can give God a little piece of something and you think that it's not a big deal, but he can take that little piece and he can maximize it and make it something so powerful. That's why it's always important that even the little things that we do, we put God behind it. We ask God to be with us so that he can make it that much greater, because he's God and he's in control and we're just human and we can't do much more than that. That's the meaning of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, the leftovers, and how we can still carry on today. Make sense? Yeah.
Since God could do anything, couldn't he just make like a lot more bread pieces with not crumbling them?
Well, he didn't need to make more because it was enough. Remember what I just said? Because you're thinking like we think, like humans think, well, we just need more bread. No, we need more bread. But Jesus is God. Jesus could have probably used just 1 loaf of bread, or just 1 piece of bread and fed everybody, or just 1 piece of a fish, not even a whole fish, a piece of a fish and fed everybody, because he's God. But he was just wanting to show the people, his followers, that it's not just about the food. It's about bringing everything you have to God and watching him make it great. Make sense? So they thought they didn't have enough, and they didn't. But that's okay, because they had God, and God made it enough. Make sense? Because he can do miracles, and we can't. So the message of that story is always leave things to God, who can maximize everything for you. All right? Let's continue. Hold on. Let's continue. Jesus walks on water. Okay, so immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake. while he sent the people home. So he sent the people home who were following him, and then he told the disciples to get back into the boat to cross to the other side of the lake. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. So they were in a boat, and there was big waves, big strong winds coming, and it was threatening to blow them away and maybe sink the boat. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. So he was in the hills, okay? He was in the hills by himself praying, and he noticed that his friends were in the boat, in the water, in trouble. So he came to them, okay? Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. They were scared, okay? In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost." They didn't know what it was. Like, "Oh, it's a ghost." But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." So Peter just wanted to know, is that really you? Is that really you, Jesus? So he said, "If it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" Okay. When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshipped him. "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. Now let me explain something to you. Who was it that said, "If it's really you, tell me to come to you"?
Peter.
It was Peter. So Peter asked Jesus to allow him to walk on water towards him, right? Or was it Jesus that said, "Hey, Peter, I want you to come over here and walk on water"? It was Peter who asked, right? That's important. Peter asked God, Jesus, Peter asked God, "If it is you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." Okay? And God said, "Yes, come." But then, when Peter was distracted, he wasn't paying attention to God, who was right in front of him, who he was walking towards, he started thinking about all the other things that was going on around. Instead of focusing on God, he started focusing on the waves and the wind and the boat moving crazy, and he's starting to get a little scared. He's looking below him. The water's very deep. He's looking at all his problems, but he's not focusing on God, who's right in front of him, who answered his question, "Yes, come, walk to me. I'm God, walk to me." Okay? And because he got scared, he started sinking. Because doubt crept into his mind. He's like, "I don't know what's going on here. This is kind of weird. This is kind of creepy, scary. Am I going to fall? Am I going to sink?" He started worrying, so that's why he started sinking. And that's why Jesus grabbed him anyway, okay? He could have just sank. But Jesus is so loving, he grabbed him anyway and said, "You have so little faith. Why did you doubt me?" In other words, I told you to come. You asked me, first of all, you asked me to, "Can you walk over to me?" And I said, "Yes, come." So if I tell you come, come. Have no fear. Okay? That's the message. Don't have fear. When you have confirmation from God to do something, don't be afraid. Okay? All right. Almost done. This is the last paragraph. After they had crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret. When the people recognized Jesus, the news of his arrival spread quickly. throughout the whole area, and soon people were bringing all their sick to be healed. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, just to let them touch the piece of his clothes. And all who touched him were healed. Anybody who touched Jesus was healed. Okay? All right, that's chapter 14. Questions?
Yes. So, why did the daughter of
Herodias' daughter?
Yeah. Why did she need that? Why did she want it? And
That's a good question. I don't think she wanted it. So the Bible doesn't say specifically all of that detail. So I'll tell you what I think, but I'll be sure to separate the two. There's a difference between what Daddy thinks and what the Bible actually says. So if the Bible says it, I'll tell you it says it. If it doesn't, then I'll tell you, hey, it doesn't specify what it says, but I'll tell you what I think. Okay? So it says in the Bible, it says that Herodias' daughter, so Herodias urged her daughter. And it was only because Herodias urged her daughter that her daughter asked for that. So basically, like, she was saying, like, hey, ask him to give you this. And then she said, okay. And then she did the dance. And then she asked Herod, what Herodias had asked her for. Okay? Now, why she decided that that's what she wanted, I don't know. But I can tell you it was evil. I can tell you it was wicked.
It was gross.
It was gross. So yeah, it was wicked and it was evil. And it represents more so that there's evil out there that always works against God or his disciples or people who follow him. So people who are followers of Jesus or people who are close to Jesus suffered a lot because there was a lot of people who hated Jesus. Because, like you said when he was on the cross, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they're doing. You know, they didn't know that he was God. And even when they did, and they found out that they should have known, and they should have done more of their research to know who he was or who he was saying he was. Okay.
Goodbye.
Questions?
Oh, when Peter was walking across the water, was he surprised that he was walking across the water?
Yeah, I think he was surprised, but you got to remember, he asked for something great. He asked Jesus to allow him to walk on water. And Jesus said, yes, come. So even though he was probably nervous and scared, the message there is, ask for great things is okay. You can ask for something great, like Peter asking to walk on water. But when you get what you ask for, and you see that God approves and says, yes, my answer is yes, don't be afraid of what God is doing, and don't think that he won't protect you. God is with you. Okay? Okay? I'll tell you another little tidbit. Before Jesus came, in the Old Testament, they talk about Jesus' name would be Emmanuel, and Emmanuel means God is with us. So, if God is with you, you should never be afraid. That's the moral of that story. Don't be afraid. If you ask to cross the water, and God says yes, cross the water, and know that God has your back. He's taking care of you, okay? If you ask, and he says yes. Okay.
It's something very different from the story.
No, then we'll talk about that offline, but we want to focus
It
on it.
has God in it. It was something that we talked about in the car, so I'll just...
Other time. Alright? We'll talk about it, but this is for this story only, alright? Alright, thank you guys.